Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to Shop Talk with MADDOG. I'm your host, Daniel MADDOG McPhee, and joining me today is a dear friend of mine, a friend of a friend of a friend, Tim Donor Woods, RCAF. Donor, bro, welcome to the show, man.
Morning from Australia, man, dog.
So, dude, it's been a while since we've chatted in person or otherwise. I was recently at the RCAF symposium, ran into many of our mutual friends. Um, Jeremy Hansen for one. He says hi, by the way. Um, let's see who else. Shadow. Um, let's see. Go Go. Like a bunch of the bros were there. Um, it was a good time. So, dude, let's just get started with the standard intro questions here. Tell me a bit about yourself. Where'd you go to uni? What got you into aviation? How'd you get bitten by the bug? A quick overview of your career, and then we'll go from there.
Okay, sure. Well, I went to University of McMaster in Hamilton. I grew up in Dundas,
Yeah.
and I mean, for me, the bug was planted early. Um, it was 1982. I remember my dad took me to an air show in Hamilton, and and it turns out the Voodoos from 416 Squadron went by there, and I didn't know that at the time. I was really young. I mean, Rose was probably flying them because you know how old Rose is. I'm going to try and keep track of how many digs I can get in on Rose here. So let's do one dig for Rose. Um, but yeah, I do remember a formation of four jets going by, and they were carrying out, smoke trail, and I remember just getting hooked.
Yeah.
And from what I can see from looking at the old program from it, is it was Voodoo's from 416 Squadron, what turned out to be my first Hornet Squadron as well. And uh, and then went into the Air Cadets, and the first time I saw the F-18 was 1987. I was at the Trenton Air Cadet Camp, and it's sitting right at the end of the runway in Trenton.
Mm.
And we had been there for about 2 weeks on course. And I still remember it to the day. We were sitting in the barracks, and an airplane came over and landed, and somebody comes running into the door, through the door of the barracks, and yells down the barracks, F-18, and we hadn't seen one because it's just all been Hercules and 707s and that there. So we all ran outside, and the Hornet was really new at that point. It was, it had only showed up in 1982, and all of them hadn't even been delivered by that point.
Yeah.
And I remember us all lined up on the fence, and this Hornet just came across the camp and ripped right over top of the barracks, and I could see the cockpit lights. It was that close,
Mm-hmm.
and I mean that really hooked the deal, to see the F-18 like that. And funny enough, I was telling that story one day at the squadron, and one of my squadron mates was along the fence. There was quite a few of us there. There was a couple hundred kids. And one of my squadron mates was on the fence that day. We matched up the dates and that we were on the same course. So so I make a point every time I go to Trenton to blast over the cadet camp that's at the end of the runway, to go ahead and try and grab the next generation of people to come on and fly fighters. So
That's incredible. That's incredible. So, let's talk a bit about the training pipeline. So in primary, was the Musketeer still around when you did primary, or?
no, like it was the Tiger Moth when Rose went through, but yeah, see, you got that one. Good. I'm gonna put down another ding on Rose there. No, no, the Musketeer had actually just left. It was the Slingsby
Ah.
when I went through, um, and then on to the Tudor,
Uh-huh.
and trained on the Tudor. And then we streamed on the Tudor. You went to either jet multi engine or helicopter, and I went on to the jet stream,
Mhm.
and then after that we did fighter lead-in training on the Tudor as well, because the F5s had been retired. So I did my fighter lead-in training on the Tudor in Moose Jaw, and then because the Hawk and the Harvard were the new platforms coming in, what they did was they front loaded a whole bunch of like a fighter pool of people for that transition. So there was a long wait after finishing Moose Jaw and the fighter lead-in training. I did some on-the-job training up in Cold Lake for about a year before starting the Hornet course. And then Hornet course to 416 Squadron, did FWIC in 2005, and went back to 410 Squadron as an instructor for a period. I was a Hornet demo pilot, and then I did some work in Washington D.C. on the Joint Strike Fighter program at the Joint Strike Fighter program office for the F-35. And then the latter part of my career was out in Baggaville. I did my supervisory tour in Baggaville, and then I was the skipper of 425 Squadron, and then sprinkled in some Ottawa in there, and my last job in Ottawa was director of fighter capability transition at the fighter capability office,
So are you still playing the
which you
game?
ran into some of the guys there.
You still playing the game? You still in the RCAF?
Oh yeah, yeah, I'm still in.
That's excellent.
That's why I'm down here in Australia.
Mm. So we'll get to what you're doing later in a bit, like towards the end of the interview. But you mentioned your time on 410. I think this is a perfect segue. Um, what was it like being, on camera for Jetstream, right? Like, what was it like being, on camera, your performance analyzed, I every time I watch the show, now that I know you and Scratch and a bunch of the other bros, not just Rose, I'm like, every time I rewatch, I'm like, hey, wait, I know that guy. He's a friend of mine.
Um, no, I don't think I would have want to been a student for Jetstream, where you have all of your, the course is stressful enough to have a camera crew there.
Yeah.
I was an instructor at the time when they filmed it, so the emphasis was very much on the students. So I'm not in that series very much. What I will say about it is we got on great with the crew that came from all over. A lot of Vancouver-based film crew that came up there, and it was really neat to kind of meet with them and that arts community, and hear about how they operate and that. And they stayed with us for a long time, and they went all over the place with us. And we were probably pretty standoffish with them at the start, but then we started to speak more freely. And I mean, I think you see that in the documentary series. But the thing that I found interesting was, it was meant to recruit, show people what it was like, and I've talked to pilots that have been on squadron with me afterwards that hadn't gone through their training yet and had watched Jetstream, and it spooked some of them. You know, I just think the way they do those documentaries, they want to have some drama and a storyline, and I think they did portray it very accurately. Don't get me wrong, but the two areas that they did kind of play up more than they really are were the failures and the emergencies are the two things that they really hammed up kind of more than they would normally be. And I think that um, the what they didn't capture in the background is and the way we joke around,
Right.
and the way some of the instructors would joke in the thing, we actually genuinely care about getting everybody through. Like, I still feel it to the day about we wanted to get Tim Coffin through that course. He's just a great guy, and I still that one still bugs me to the day. But
Mm.
what they weren't filming was the kind of private stuff in the background where we would talk in the room about when somebody was having troubles and all the things that we would change to try and slow down the picture or present things to the students, more systematically to kind of let them catch up. And they didn't really profile it in there. It was more about hack it or pack it
Yeah.
kind of stuff. But it really is the fighter training. is really about getting your squadron mates through and that investment in your teammates. So.
Yeah. Is Carney as much as a character as they show him on the show? Is he that much of a character?
Oh yeah, they got Carney pretty accurately. Funny enough. Great
Yeah.
fighter pilot. He's a good fighter pilot. He knows where he can pull it together in the airplane.
Yeah. So, from Jetstream, this is where you and I, well, we didn't cross paths. I think we must have crossed paths at the '09 Gatineau Air Show at some point, but, this was before we became good friends, of course. But, let's talk about the '09 demo season. The last time until recently where they painted an entire jet, in the sense that a lot of the jets post '09 to now didn't have anything on the bottom. It was just dull gray and then the top surfaces. So let's talk a bit about the '09 demo jet and your demo season.
Yeah, well, the main reason they painted the jet fully like that is because it was one of the classic Hornets that hadn't been upgraded, and it retired at the end of the air show season. So it's a lot of work. I mean, it's a lot of work to paint that airplane. And but then the crews did an awesome job that year on the paint job. But the harder part is stripping it back down and then bringing it back to that two-tone gray,
Right.
and they didn't have to do it, so it justified painting it up. And that was a big year as well. So that was the 100th anniversary of powered flight in Canada, and for the 50th anniversary of powered flight was the Golden Hawks. So that was the 100th. And the thing that was really meaningful for me, and why I felt very lucky to get it that position that particular year, is one of my mentors growing up was Fern Villeneuve, and Fern was the first lead of the Golden Hawks, and it was a real treat to have his name be put on the airplane as one of the 100 names in aviation that were stenciled on there. And that airplane is actually sitting in a museum in Calgary right now. I haven't seen it since it's gone in that museum, but I have to make a trip out there to go see it. It was a real sharp paint job, that's for sure.
I still have a vivid memory of the Hawk 1 Sabre flown by Rose. Um, I think this was around when Rose and I became friends, and you in the Hornet, and the juxtaposition of you on one side and the jet painted up to represent the Golden Hawks on the other, 50 years apart. Now when I'm thinking about it, 15 years later, it's wild to me how much things don't change, right? We're still the same lethal, agile, competent Air Force we were 15 years ago. And, time does not change the fact that fighter aviation is very much a brotherhood and a sisterhood, and we look out for each other.
Well, I mean, the air sh the not the air show, the Air Force days of the Sabre were quite different. Like that's what Fern grew up in.
Yeah,
And at that time, I don't think a lot of people know that, in the mid to late 50s, we we had 25 fighter squadrons, 14 fighter squadrons in Europe. And that's in the post-war. That's in the Sabre days, and the Canadair Sabre was the machine. And the Canadians that were flying them were kicking butt all over Europe.
yeah.
And I mean, it was nice to be able to. I mean, we went up in a duel in Toronto, and Fern was in his early 80s, I think, at the time, and I took him up in the duel, and it was his first ride in the F-18. He had done his last fighter flight on the Voodoo, I think, in Bagotville, and the T-33 in North Bay. But anyway, took him up, and Rose was in and this will go down as one of my favorite flights. We went up and chased Rose in the Sabre, and I said to Fern, I said, you want to form up on the old Golden Hawk, and even though Rose was bouncing all around like crazy because he's not a smooth pilot. I'm gonna put that one down for three. Villeneuve, Villeneuve took the controls and just slotted right in there, and I couldn't believe it. And Rose started doing some some nice wing overs, and Fern just locked right in there, and like he'd been driving the thing for years. It was a real treat. That was a nice flight for sure.
Yeah. I've flown with Rose. I can attest to how not smooth he is.
Yeah, good. I got someone down for you. Nice, Mad Dog. Woo!
Sorry, Rose. I'm not. I'm not gonna hear the end of that.
Yep, you're
So,
not.
so, do you have any like fond memories? Because I've talked to various airshow pilots, Scratch, Boss Rude, formerly of the Blue Angels. Are there any air shows in your mind that stick out in your mind of this was a great memory of that season? Like, is there any particular show that stands out to you?
I mean, the thing that's different between doing the Hornet tactical demo and like the Snowbirds or the Blue Angels, they'll go through the season, a couple of seasons, they'll be
Right.
there doing it for a couple of years. But for the tactical guys, they just go for one season. They just drop into this air show network and then pitch out. And I mean, the thing that stands out the most for me is that how great everybody was in that circuit. Like just to, they were very welcoming. You come in as a very experienced Hornet pilot, but not as an air show performer, and they just kind of take you under their wing and really make you feel like part of it because you go around to a lot of the shows with the same people. I think you probably know the Peaches, Warren Peach, Kent Peach.
Yeah.
Um, I joke around that they're jerks, and everybody laughs because they know that that's the furthest thing from the truth. They're just the greatest guys. I got on great with them, and there's just too many to name of all the people that kind of take you under their wing, and you get to go to these different air show sites with that group of people,
Yeah.
and then inspiring the next generation. The most meaningful ones for me is when you run into somebody who you know from when you start talking that they love aviation, and they'll know some little tidbit about the airplane. You get all walks. I mean, I've been asked twice whether or not the F-18 could also go under the water, as a kind of extreme example. And then you get other ones that are real refined questions. They know what they're talking about. They're people that know the airplane better than I do, to be honest. And the and obviously if you can answer that for them or inspire them to want to get in the Air Force, then that is also very meaningful. Those are the two biggest things that I would say,
Mhm.
that I remember. The flying itself was fantastic too, because when you fly the F-18, you're not really a pilot.
Mhm.
You are a weapon systems manager and a tactician,
Mhm.
and you're always in formation. All the tactics are executed either four ship, eight ship, two ship, and so you're always just continually thinking about the fight and how it's going and where the wingman is. Can they see me? How much gas do they have? Do they have enough chaff or flare? What's the fuel state? Is the missile count across the formation good? Does he have good situation awareness? Does he have me visual? And you're balancing all of these things to continually figure out whether or not at any given moment you're winning or losing, and whether you should continue or whether you should try and buy yourself some time. And as a result, you don't ever you come down from the mission just sweating, and you don't really appreciate that you've been flying. Um, and whereas when you do the air show, you really feel the airplane. You fly the airplane very meticulously, and it's nice to be able to just get that connected with the airplane and actually fly it.
Mhm.
Um, it's a different type of flying for sure. Fighter flying versus regular flying.
Yeah. And I just want to take a minute and touch on you mentioned, the people, like especially Nayland, right? You mentioned how everybody great guy and everybody loved him. right, when he was on course. But the thing I wanted to touch on is how in aviation generally, as Scratch mentioned, it attracts a certain type of person, and you get these, you know, I'm a, you know me, I have a slight disability, and you guys don't treat me any differently. I'm one of the bros by everything but name, right? In aviation, I'm just another one of the gang, right? Versus, some other places where, oh, you have a disability, or they might not. The point is, aviation doesn't care who you are. If you can,
Yeah.
that's the point I'm trying to get at, right? Like, if if you're if you're
If
in
you
a
love aviation, then you have that common. You're speaking to each other on a different level if you have
yes, thank you.
that love of aviation.
That's
Yeah,
that's what
for
I was
sure.
saying. That's what I was trying to say. But let's move on a bit. Let's move on to some of the more nitty gritty, not necessarily tactical, but let's talk a bit about the Hornet as a BFM and ACM platform.
Hmm.
I know that Scratch and I touched on it. Rose and I sort of skirted it, but not quite. So
Well,
let's.
Rose doesn't know much about BFM. I'm gonna put that one down. Okay, sorry. Go ahead. I mean, he was a test pilot, right? So he's a slide rule, and so it's
I'm
hard to do
surprised he doesn't
BFM
have
with a
the
slide
giant
rule.
nerdy glasses on, right? You know the ones I'm thinking of, right?
Yeah, yeah. Oh yeah, good one. That's good. I think we're at 5 here, buddy. So that's good.
We're getting there. You know what magic number we have to hit.
Yeah, right. So okay, sorry, I've cut you off there. It was BFM and ACM.
Yeah, what's the Hornet like, especially in a DACT environment specifically? Like Hornet fighting Hornet, it's pretty evenly matched. It's about the man in the box. Damn it, I quoted the movie. I owe you $5. You get the
Yeah.
point. You get the point I'm making. What's the Hornet like as a DACT platform, and any memorable DACT hops of yours?
Yeah, I mean, there, the thing we can compare with the most is what we did in training, right? I
Right.
have fought Polish MiG-29s, and the Hornet did quite well
Mm.
in that case. I intercepted a flanker, but we didn't really get to turn. But the most experience I have is like you say in dissimilar air combat training is with either uh, European or American aircraft, and I would say the for me the harder fight was against the F-16. I've never fought an F-22. But the F-16 was a sports car, and even if they made a mistake, they had so much thrust to get them out of trouble. Because ultimately, what you're trying to do in the Hornet is to force them to make a mistake, And what they would say about the Hornet is the Hornet had one good pull, and what that means is that you could get a real good nose position, and really lay on the angle of attack and bury the nose and hopefully scare a rate fighter like the F-16 off of their game plan and bring them into your way of fighting. Bring them into your regime. Which is a single circle fight. But if they knew that you were a bit of a one-trick pony, or they just put the coals to the airplane, they could get themselves out of trouble. The F-15 was a little different. As long as you beat them beyond visual range, because they were very capable beyond visual range. If you got them to the merge, the F-15 was an easier fight for the Hornet in general, I would
Right.
say. But like I said, that airplane, similar to other air superiority fighters, was designed not to get to the merge. If you can win where you have the advantage.
Right.
So yeah,
What about like non-American types? I'm assuming you fought some non-American types as well.
yeah, yeah. Tornadoes weren't a great dogfighting airplane, I would say. They were more about low-level strike.
Mhm.
Uh, you know, I've I would say this the same with the kind of the Harrier. The Harrier was more of a it had an attack utility for a small shipborne or um, or land operations that you know what ends up happening is there's a payoff for that. For the ability to land vertically, you have to have a lot of weight and engine components to
Right.
support that, and then you make it a less capable dogfighter. And I mean, I don't know if when the Hornet first came out, there was talk between Australia and Canada, because we're going to use it as an Air Force platform, to reduce some of the weight in the airplane, because it's got a lot of weight in there for carrier traps and catapult launches and stuff, like the launch bar and the wing fold. We didn't really need all those things because they just add weight to the airplane, and that's part of the reason why Boyd's work on the F-16 made it such a lightweight fighter, a very disciplined approach to weight. And then the Navy can't do that just because of the role of the way you got to operate off of the boat. And there's a performance uh, cost
Right.
to that. So now when we're going back to the F-35, we are we're going to get the Air Force model. So the landing gear is not as robust, but that means it doesn't weigh as much, and as a result, the fighter can perform better. So those are the kinds of trade-offs you get. When you add certain utility to the airplane that you may very well need, but it decreases its flight performance.
Right. And this is actually the perfect segue because you worked on the Future Fighter Capability Program, as far as I know from talking to some of the people in attendance at the RCAF symposium that I've been at since the last 2 days, including some names that you recognize. Shadow Lawson,
Mm-hmm.
Gogo. People
Is
we
there
know.
anybody you don't know?
Uh, Bob Wade. Um,
Oh, really? Okay. Oh, there you go. Yeah.
some of
I've
the
only
early.
corresponded with Bob Wade a couple of times, but he's a character, that's for sure.
But the point I'm making,
Great
this is
guy.
probably the perfect transition to the F-35. Considering we're celebrating our centennial right now, let's talk a bit about. I know you're not Billy Flynn, and I still have beef with him for canceling on me last minute. Long story.
Oh.
I That's a dig for him. Put it on the list. Um, but um, but let's talk a bit about what the F-35 is going to bring to the high-end fight for us.
It's on another level. It is a generational jump. And I wish I could get into all the details with you of just how fantastic it is, but that's in the secret sauce of what that airplane can do.
Yeah.
I mean, it is an incredible platform. I've got about 100 hours in the simulator, because when I was in the office, it was a little earlier days, and
Mhm.
what we were doing was we were building the tactics in the simulator
Right.
before the airplane fielded. And just so the main experience I have is operating the airplane in that environment. And I've heard Billy Flynn talk about this, and I'll completely agree with them, is that, when you first get there, you bring what you know, and we started fighting it like a Hornet,
Mhm.
and you don't fight it like a Hornet. There are ways that you can really capitalize on the capability of that airplane. And I would say the biggest advantage of it is that you can fight very aggressively. And as soon as you're fighting on that offensive side, well, then you've got the decision advantage, and you're forcing the enemy to react to you. And that's what part of what makes that platform just so incredible. And I'm really excited for the Air Force taking it to the next level with the fifth gen.
Yeah, I was talking to Slice about it today. I'm sure you know Slice. Um,
Hmm.
and we talked about it briefly. And it reminds me of a funny little vignette. So, I texted Rose because I was at Tailhook last year. That's neither here nor there. That's something that you and I can discuss over a beer next time you're on our side of the border. Next time you're back in the NCR, let me know. We'll discuss it over a beer. But basically, uh, I landed. Billy Flynn said something along the lines of, "It's so easy a monkey could land the F-35B vertically,
Yeah,
right, or something
I
to that
did.
effect."
In simulation, it was very easy. Yes,
And I landed the 35
compared to the
Bravo
Harrier
in
here.
the sim.
Hmm?
And Rose said, and I quote, "Well, well, that makes sense. Have I've met you, so."
Jeez, huh? Ruthless, that guy.
which is a perfect segue. Let's talk a bit about. I know Scratch and I touched on it, but let's kind of expand on fighter culture a bit and why, fighter pilot humor and why it's the way it is without getting into too many specifics or mentioning the funny number or whatever. Let's talk about the culture of fighter aviation for a minute here.
Yeah, yeah. It's interesting. It is a culture that um, can get into like a stereotype. I mean, Top Gun plays a bit on those stereotypes, um, but there's a subtlety to the background to that I don't think is always picked up. In that it is very much team oriented. It's not about an individual outperforming others. Like you really want success for the team.
Right.
And the thing is fighter pilots know the stereotypes, so they play up on them. But when they do, they're joking. They're generally kind of uh, tongue-in-cheek, reinforcing some of those stereotypes. When in fact, I think if people were to spend time with a squadron, they would see how they work together and how professional they are, and how when it's business time, it's business, and then when you're out of that environment, it's time to relax.
Right.
You know, I think that there's a bit to the sense of humor too, where I have buddies that are in paramedics or in firefighters, and the way that they kind of can deal with the stress is they can talk very casually about stuff that, oh my God, like the guy died in front of you, but they're just trying to deal with it,
Right.
and deal with the stresses of that job in their own way, and it comes out as a dark sense of humor sometimes.
Right.
But it's hard for somebody who doesn't work in that environment to kind of sit at the sidelines and think like, whoa, that I'm not part of that. But the reality is it's part of kind of trying to bring people in and help them deal with the stresses of the job, because there are many.
Yeah.
Um, and uh, and and I and and not a lot of people see in the background of that tongue-in-cheek sense of humor, because in the background you are very much concerned about uh, how people are doing on the unit, because your effectiveness as a unit
Yeah.
is goes down to all the individual elements. So
Speaking of stressors, and I think Scratch and I touched on it to a certain extent. What was your scariest moment flying the jet? What was your moment where you're like, "Holy expletive! I almost."
uh, there's a couple where just pushing the weather or the gas started getting tight. Those are probably the more common ones. Of just where it's like, oh, this is going to be tough getting in here. In the back of your mind. Um, I did find in combat and operations that we simulated it very well on things like red flag and maple flag. Where when you got there, it was just like, okay, I recognize this. This is how we trained, and it actually gelled pretty good. So um, the joke of not the joke, but the air show seasons, the demo pilots tend to talk about, yeah, there'll be one scare where you'll spook yourself. And I did have one in the demo season where um, it was called the rudder roll. And this is really technical, Mad Dog, so try to keep up. But
Feel free to
basically
use
what
your
you do in
hands.
the Hornet.
Feel free to use your
No, I
hands.
won't use my hands. But what you do in the Hornet is you bury the stick backwards, and then you stomp on the rudder, and then you count about 5 potatoes. You say it out loud: potato, potato, one potato, two potato, and then you. I'm joking. It's a very the Hornet. It looks amazing when the jet does it, but basically what you do is you put on a whole bunch of angle of attack, and then you just stomp on the rudder, and then the airplane just kind of swaps ends on the nose. It looks really cool from behind, and you're basically just rolling when you're continuing at about 35 alpha while you're rolling. It's a real neat little area of the flight controls when it does this. And so I used to do that maneuver, but I would always have an up vector when I stopped. So even though you're going through with your nose essentially 35 degrees nose up from the air, I'm also climbing, so I'm getting away from the ground. And in Beaufort show, I didn't get that up vector, and I basically shot the maneuver level. So at one point, when you do the rudder roll, you're upside down, except so I got to use my hands. Is that cheating?
No, I said you
Okay, I
definitely
use my
can
hands.
use your
You're
hands.
going through the air,
Yeah,
35 alpha upside down, so you're 35 degrees nose down,
right,
but you're going through the air level, but it spooks you
right.
because 35 degrees nose down at 300-400 feet is a little. So that was the one that it spooked me. Um,
Yikes.
you know, incidentally, listen to the tape afterwards. I was like, oh, oh, oh. That was what
Uh,
my brain was processing. But the airplane just held the alpha, and a couple seconds later, the nose was back upright, and I got 35 degrees nose up.
yeah.
So that was the one spook that I had on the demo season.
Mm.
And it's funny because I still remember landing and taxiing by the announcer, and announcers clapping like this, and I'm like, oh my god, I boned that one and nobody noticed.
That's
Yeah.
hilarious. That's just really hilarious. So, um, another great coping mechanism. I think we talked a bit about the humor, but also the songs, right? And there have been a couple, recent uh recent nickels on the grass, as we call them, in the states. And let's talk a bit about the culture around, you know, music specifically and fighter pilot culture and how they intersect.
Yeah, I don't know what song you're referring to there on that, but the one thing that I will remark about the songs is it is more about that kind of teamwork and camaraderie. I remember when I was at Squadron last time, we were singing a song from the Muppet movie of all things. Like,
Really?
so it wasn't necessarily about the material, but the
Yeah.
one song that I think a lot of fighter pilots like is we take an old German song from the war
Yeah.
and sing it. And to sing your enemy's song is it's different. It's eerie in a way. It's in part of the song it goes, tonight we fly against England, England, and we're singing to the flag. I'm sure you've probably heard that one.
Yeah.
That has some nostalgia to it, and there's something always that you're uh, kind of bearing when you think about fighting against an enemy, and you're going to go up against two people that love aviation,
Right.
are going to have a contest together. There's something about that that's on a different level, and that's why I think singing that song in particular has some meaning for fighter pilots.
Yeah. And when I was referring to the prank concerto, I was referring to the tradition of piano burning. And where does that come from
Oh,
exactly?
yeah. So that's the Brits. That's their thing.
That's a them thing?
Um, yeah, I've seen a few piano burnings. I think it's pretty funny. I mean, the thing's on fire, and they get the best piano player they can to play it while it's burning, and then it's it is a it is a unique thing for sure.
Yeah. And of course, we're talking a bit about the culture. We get back to flying in a second, but challenge coins. Oh boy,
Yeah,
challenge coins. I made the mistake of thinking about dropping one at Tailhook. I never heard
yeah.
the end of it.
Oh, that could be expensive.
Uh, so for the uninitiated, let's talk about how the rules of challenge coins work. So how does that work?
Well, it's more than challenge coins. I think that what it is in not just fighter aviation, it's also in military things. There's a lot of little nitnoy rules and things and practices and games that you play, and they ultimately keep you mentally sharp. You're always kind of doing a checklist in your head. Have I got this? Have I got my hat? Have I got that? All these little things that, as a skill set, then you move to operational situations, and you're continually thinking about timing and exactly how you're saying things and the word and the precise wording, and then we turn them into little games to kind of keep you mentally sharp. And I would say that the challenge coin is okay, at its base level, it's a way to get free drinks, but you have to be tactical with the way you use them, and you have to be tactical in your lives, because you're like, well, if I get this coin out, I've got to be sure that I know I'm going to win this fight. And you have to assess now, okay, I saw that he rushed out of the room. Maybe he forgot his thing, or he had his coin in this other jacket. So maybe he hasn't got it here. Or even better, full well somebody doesn't have their coin because you swiped it when they weren't looking. Like, because if you ain't cheating, you ain't trying, right?
As
But
the late
that's
Snodgrass would often say.
yeah, right.
Do
And
you know
and
Snort, by
and
the way?
I did meet him a couple times on the air show season. Great guy, and what a terrible loss. Just a terrible loss. Yeah.
Yeah. He
And
was the
we just lost Bud Anderson
I heard, yeah, and
two weeks ago too. There's a guy, you want to talk about character. Bud Anderson and Stocky Edwards are two people that stand out in my mind of just class acts, like complete gentlemen, soft spoken, and then ruthless in the air. Like, that to me is the most amazing way to weave that skill set into life. It's and Bud Anderson and Stocky Edwards stand out to me as two of the best guys for that character of how you know humble, aggressive kind of approach, and you never want to meet them in a fight.
yeah, yeah. They are the exact opposite of the late great Robin Olds
Um,
in
Yeah, I
some
don't know too
ways.
much about. I have seen some interviews with him, and I read his book. Um, Boyd was a particularly abrasive character too, and there are guys like that. But when you can be very, that's why Bud and Stocky stand out, is because when you can be at that other end of the spectrum, where
Yeah,
you're over here or you're over here, and it's like a light switch.
exactly.
That's impressive to see.
Yeah,
But I think in the heat of the moment, everybody will get a little excited. I've 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 been excited in the airplane before, and you're yelling into the mic, in the middle of a fight when things get hairy. But it always impresses me when you can be at the two ends of that.
mm. Yes, yes. That's the thing. Like people have this. I think Scotch and I touched on it a bit, but people have this misconception of you know fighter pilots were I'm not gonna use the term I want to use, but we tend not to follow rules. We do whatever we want to do. We just, it's like it's almost as if air combat is some kind of game. We don't take it seriously. But the reality is, after spending 15 years around you guys, the exact opposite is true. It couldn't be further from the truth. The stereotype.
Well, you have to be confident. Don't get
Yeah.
me wrong. If you aren't confident that you know your stuff, you're not gonna perform well. But at the same time, it's like a performance curve thing,
Right.
where you where you just need to have a little bit of butterflies in your stomach, about, oh my God, what if I do that wrong, or what if I miss this? And that, that can keep you sharp, when it comes time for peak performance. And that's kind of the area that you want to sit in, but you do definitely want to be on that confidence side where you're, and it's funny. I think I saw uh, a documentary on a stand-up comedian, and they were measuring his blood pressure during the day. And right before he went on stage, his blood pressure peaked at the highest. Like just waiting for, they're saying his name and out he goes. And then the second he gets out on stage, it just goes, boom. He's in the moment, and his blood pressure went to the lowest
Mm-hmm.
during the act it had ever been during the day. And I would say that that's been my experience in fighter flying too. You're kind of, you've been walking out or taxiing out. You're, especially if it's a very complex mission, you're running through a bunch of things in your head. But then once things get flowing, you're in the moment, and hopefully a bit out ahead of the airplane, and it's a neat kind of peak performance zone that you can get into.
Mm-hmm. And speaking of peak performance in the jet, this is the perfect segue. Rose and I touched on it for a little bit, but we didn't really expand on it. Let's talk a bit about the fighter weapons instructor course, like more in depth than Rose and I touched on it. Like let's talk a bit about, the mechanics of the course, what's covered, that type of thing, like the unclassified version of it. Like what's it like going through the course? How difficult is it, that type of thing. So let's go over the fighter weapons instructor course for a second, because fighter weapons instructors are, I won't say top of the class, top of the cream of the crop, whatever term you want to use, but they're a certain level above your average, not saying that average fighter guys are, anything other than great, but you get what I'm getting at.
Mm. Well, the thing is though too is there's some luck involved too,
Mm,
because um, if you get, and this is the thing that can get missed sometimes in FWIC, is that you got an opportunity to just fly the fighter. Like
right.
there's a whole bunch of jobs at the squadron. Somebody will be the schedule. If when you first show up, you're just working on snacks and little taskers, but then there are people that'll work on flight safety. There are people that'll work on their primary responsibility be putting the schedule together all the time. The ops section is generally the busiest cell at the squadron. There'll be people that do maybe more administrative functions and training organization. But when you go to the FWIC course, you just get to work on your skill set as a fighter pilot
Mm-hmm.
for 4 months, 5 months, whatever the course, however long the course is.
Mm.
So it's a bit of a blessing in that way that not everybody gets to do it. And when you get to work on your craft for that long, you can come back with a higher skill set than what you went in with. The
Mm-hmm.
key thing I think for us is that particularly in peacetime, the more important aspect of FWIC and like Top Gun is ultimately what you bring back
Mm-hmm.
to help others. It's the instructor portion of that,
Right.
because unless we're going to the fight and it's I'm out there kicking butt, taking names, in the middle of a fight. My real value in peacetime is how much I can help others bring up their game,
Right.
and so you have to be able to translate those tactics back into executable skill sets. And in a formation, you're going to have a varying skill set. Like that's the weird thing about fighter flying, right? Is you may have number 4 as the skipper of the squadron.
Yeah.
Number 2 is a person who's on their first tour on the Hornet, and then 1 and 3 are middle of the road experienced pilots, and you've got to now adjust your game plan depending on that skill set to make sure that you can execute it across the foreship. So the joke about FWIC, after you do the course, is the answer to every question you get is first of all, look it up, because they tend to come to you like an encyclopedia, because you've studied the fighter flying pretty in depth for a while,
Yeah.
um, and they'll use you like a bit of an encyclopedia. And then the other answer that you get out of that course is it depends,
Yep.
which sounds like a complete cop out, but it's not. It's because when somebody asks you a question, it's like, okay, give me a rule of thumb for doing this. Then you're like, well, it depends. What airplane are you fighting? What's your current situational awareness? And it's always this kind of matrix of all these little variables that are continually adjusting in a flight that you're continually weighing as you go along to what the best course of action is in any given moment. And that's the thing that I think that FWIC ultimately provided the most was considering more variables.
Right.
And then what some people tend to have a problem with when they come back from that course is they try to bring all those variables back to everybody in the squadron when in fact what you want to do is you want to simplify it
Right.
as much as you can. A good tactic is a simple one,
Right.
and if you can um, you know, kind of be able to make your game plan very straightforward for others, it'll be that much more executable. But I
Right.
mean, so you really concentrate in the beginning on those instructional aspects, and you kind of do that in the dogfighting phase, and then you move on to more advanced phases where you'll culminate in like a mass attack. I still remember uh, all the engines starting up in Maple Flag. I can hear it to the day. All the engines of all these. There was like 70 aircraft taken off under my plan
Mm-hmm.
that day when I was package commander. And
Mm-hmm.
it's a little bit overwhelming, but you could stick a pin in me because at that point of the course, we'd been in it for a long time, and you had practiced and rehearsed it and gone over it. That you were confident that your plan was going to work out well. So
Mm-hmm. Maple flag is the closest thing we did to combat besides like red flag. But do you have any combat time?
yeah, I do. Yeah, done some op impact, and did some NORAD or NATO air policing as well. We were based in Romania a couple times.
Mm-hmm.
Hmm.
Because it's interesting because a lot of the guy a lot of our mutual friends, the amount of combat time varies, right? Rose was in Kosovo. Yes, he's that old, ladies and gents. um,
I'll put one down for you. There you go.
thanks. He's gonna hate me after this.
It's
Worth it.
no, it feels good to make fun of him. Feels good, doesn't it? I just ride with it. See it.
You're a bad influence, you know that?
No, no, you get the sense of humor. Love him to death.
Anyways, Rose has combat time in Kosovo. Some dudes don't have combat time at all, like Scratch, no combat time, right? And then, because I think it goes back to the cyclical nature of our deployments and how, you'd have a period where you come back from deployment, you're still busy, you're still doing flying or whatever, but you're in a sort of stand down limbo-ish period between deployments. What's it like in that in between phase? Like, what's it like on a fighter squadron when you're in the weird in between phase between, like, say, pre deployment training, coming back from a deployment, whatever maintenance phase, if there is a maintenance phase, and then restarting the cycle? What's that like?
Yeah, it is. It does. The performance of the squadron goes up and down, and I would say when the performance of the squadron is at its tightest is when we go on a detachment. Usually, most often we go and fight with the Americans in training, either at a flag or just the similar air combat training, and you
Mm-hmm.
can feel it when you come back from one of those and you're flying every day, and the technicians are the jets, man, they just keep them running when you're on dead. I don't know what it is. They just click,
Mm-hmm.
and you get on the step. You can feel the performance of the squadron go up, and then it starts to drop off when the weather gets bad in Cold Lake and Baggetville, and you're not flying very much, and you can't do that much dynamic flying because all the cloud and that kind of stuff. You can feel that tempo while you're on squadron. And,
Yeah.
and in terms of operations, it does kind of sound terrible that these, these fighter pilots want to go into combat. But, in reality, it's like a fireman without a fire, but you need that. You need that these people that you would, spend that kind of money on and that kind of effort training them, that they do want to do their job and they do want to get in there. They're not, hoping for things to go sideways in the world. But if there's a fight out there, they want to do Canada's part, and those are the kinds of people that you need, joining the Canadian forces.
Right.
That what if the time comes, ultimately you hope it doesn't, but if the time comes, that they are eager to step up. So,
Right. And let's just take a small little segue here. Those deployments that you did would not have been possible without aerial refueling. And I want to touch a bit about, there's a very famous scene in Jetstream where you guys are behind a USAF KC-135, right? How bad is the Iron Maiden? Because I've heard varying stories about being behind the being behind the 135 and refueling off the weird knuckle off the end of the boom. How bad is the
yeah,
Iron Maiden?
it is tough at first. The thing, why it's called the Iron Maiden is if you mess it up, it'll slap the airplane and crack the canopy, or really damage the airplane or break the probe off or whatever. That's the thing. It's a very heavy, because you're converting what would normally be a boom refueler to a basket,
Yeah.
and so the gas is on, and then you actually have about a 6 foot, I think it actually is 6 foot hose, and you've got to now create a 90-degree bend to open the valve so that your airplane can get fuel. So you're turning on the tap, with an airplane bumping into another airplane, right?
Right.
Um, it's the thing about the Iron Maiden is it's generally, because it's such a heavy basket, it's easy to get onto the basket, but then it's hard to stay on it in that zone. Whereas some other systems, they're harder to get on them, but once they're a very soft basket. So as a result, as you get near them, you push the basket around and it moves on you, and it's hard to get on to that basket.
Right.
But then once you're on there, it's very forgiving and it's got lots of room to play. And if you mess it up, it's soft, so it just bounces off the airplane. So that's why the Iron Maiden is called the Iron Maiden. It's funny, one of the stories that I laugh about. I still remember off the west coast of Comox, and you're all stacked up next to the refueler, waiting for your turn to go get gas.
Right.
And one of the guys beside me, and normally it's a very methodical thing. It's like, okay, number one, you're cleared to the astern position, and then you go copy astern position, then you go back, you kind of position yourself, you do it all very mechanical. Everybody moves carefully around the airplane. And
Hmm.
we had this big, mass attack that was going, and a lot of, the bad guys and the good guys were going to the same tanker.
Right.
And, so a lot of people were expecting this gas. And the guy next to me, he goes he goes, they call him up, it's his turn to fuel. And he goes over and does the fastest maneuver I have ever seen to get on the basket. And he goes and he crumps the basket. He does this thing, and it was almost like, oh my God, he's going to land it. He's going to do the fastest transition from being on the wing to getting gas. I'm going, oh, oh, oh. And then wham, he hits the basket, and the basket just crumples, and then it starts spinning like this. And before the tanker crew could figure out that he's the guy that's done the damage, he goes, tanker, your basket's effed up. I just started guffawing, like he passed the blame so fast. And he's like, hey, your basket's messed up. Am I gonna get gas or not, tanker? And I was laughing so hard. And then, like, I told him after we landed, like later on, like this is probably, an hour later or 45 minutes later, I'm going down the wire attacking a boat, which is a little weird, but, and I'm laughing in my tape because I'm still laughing about him crumping that basket. Oh man, it's funny. It can be very humbling. Uh, I remember my last sortie, in Iraq. I was my flight was booked. I was literally landing, and at 4 a.m. I was flying back to Canada, and I was still kind of airborne. and there were thunderstorms all around, and it was an Italian tanker, and the basket was just all over the place.
Right.
And I'm like, oh my God, I'm not getting home tonight. Like that can really humble you. Or, you know, crossing the middle of the ocean.
Yeah.
You're going in an airplane where you don't have enough gas to get where you're going. And you've got to get gas, and it's nothing but blue and icebergs down there. You know, it can be humbling to get gas sometimes, that's for sure.
Yeah. But it enables operations to go ahead though. That's aerial refueling. I know I'm talking to a fighter guy, but aerial refueling is critical. Without it, we would never be able to project power to the same extent that we would, a three-bag Hornet. I don't remember the exact range off the top of my head, but a three-bag Hornet with no tanking, it cannot go as far as a three-bag Hornet with a tanker in tow.
Well, you know, I think the thing that you need to understand it too is depends what kind of flying you do. Like, you know, the burn rate when you go into afterburner is 1,000 pounds a minute. So,
Yeah.
I mean, you in a triple tanked Hornet, you could be out of gas in 16 minutes if you're not managing your power well, and you could get, you know, you could press 3 hours on that same amount of gas. You know, if you manage, you know, if you're cruising, you know, it's that's another neat dynamic of fighter flying, is how if you want all the thrust in the world right now, we'll give it to you, but it's you're going through gas like crazy when you're an afterburner, you
Yeah.
know. The thing is, with the F-35, we're switching to the boom system,
Right.
which is generally a more stable, successful way to get gas, because the boom operator is steering this big flying boom and actually connects the airplane, you know. But that won't work for the Navy, right? Because they can't have this big boom and land a tanker back at the
At the boat.
ship. So
Yeah.
that's why you got to have it reversed the other way. But this will be a new era for us, where the F-35 is now boom tanking, and it's more successful way of tanking, I'd say.
From what Slice was telling me today, we're gonna have the automated refueling. From what he told me earlier today, we're not even gonna have
Yeah, I mean,
we're gonna
yeah,
have a boom
that makes
operator
sense.
monitoring, but it's gonna be automated. We're just gonna sit there and let the system do it.
Okay, yeah, it doesn't surprise me. That seems to be an area where you could use UAVs and whatnot.
Yeah, but yeah. So let's switch gears for a second here. Once you got out of the cockpit, What did you get up to?
I've had a couple ground tours. My first one was in Washington. That was working on the F-35, but like I say, we did a lot of simulator work down there, and living in DC was a blast. Our, you know, family loved it too. Great city, and then my other desk tours have predominantly been in Ottawa, and we love Ottawa. You know, I've heard you as a guy from Ottawa give Ottawa a bad rap, but I'm telling you, it's a great city. You know, we love it there. And the nice thing about you know, the job that I last had was we were in the fighter capability office, um, and that's a collection of all the fighter people in Ottawa into one office to try and get this thing done, and get it set up for the next generation of fighter aviation. So it's a fun group. It's way understaffed, but the, you know, the devotion and the time that people want to put into it is palpable.
Mm. And speaking of this great nation from coast to coast to coast, considering it's our 100th anniversary here for the RCAF this year as I record this in 2024, let's talk a bit about forward operations in the Hornet up north. Let's take a minute,
Hmm.
talk about that for a little bit. Some of the challenges, some of the highs, some of the lows, some of the memorable flying. So let's talk a bit about that.
Yeah, flying up in the north is tough. It is, you know, it is almost to the point that you don't actually, if you can avoid landing, do it,
Mm.
because the you know, the infrastructure requirements, the contamination of the runways, the facilities that are up there. It can be hard sometimes to support airplanes at those kinds of distances. So if you can refuel it, then that's something that can be tactically advantageous. That's for sure. But if you do have to land and base up there regularly, it's best that you got a good footprint up there
Mm-hmm.
to support you on the ground. You have some cables across the runway so that you can use the hook and if the runway happens to be icy, well, you don't really care if you got the cable because you trap and you have a real short landing rollout and cable keeps you straight in the runway and so but it is tough if uh if you had to have a fight up north, you're probably spending 80% of your time just uh concentrating on surviving and keeping operations going, and only about 20% of your time actively engaging. And it's a tough place to operate, that's for sure. You want to talk to Yellowknife guys about that, about all the work they'll do in sustaining the Twin Otter up there.
Yeah. And this is a nice segue here. So we're gonna loop back around to a certain extent because I wonder how they keep Red Flag Alaska rolling in that type of weather. Um, and the reason I bring that up is because let's talk a bit about Maple Flag. May it rest in peace. And the the international side of the camaraderie, the international side of the brotherhood and the sisterhood, and how interoperability is key to what we do as a Canadian fighter force.
Yeah, flag was always a lot of work. I mean, it was long days, and because if you're Cold Lake or Canadian Fire Base, you are going to Maple Flag every year, and so it was sometimes it'd be like, oh, another flag launch, because it was lots of mission planning, lots of coordinating, but it really did prepare you. The thing that the thing that always makes the training the most valuable is the adversaries.
Mm-hmm.
And so if you have good threats on the ground and a good professional simulated air threat out there, then that's where the training is most valuable. And that's where, red flag edges out Maple Flag. I would say that Maple Flag still has the best airspace everywhere. Like I have yet to see airspace that rivals it in terms of how much of the area you're able to drop, where you can go supersonic, where you can't. An exclusive use of the airspace. It is exceptional airspace. It's bigger than some European countries, for crying out loud. Like it's um, Red Flag Alaska is and down at Nellis, they've got some little awkward things smack dab in the middle of the airspace, that you have to work around. But the threats and the quality of the systems that come there, and then of course just whatever units happen to show up also sets the tone, right? If you have good EW assets, for example, that come to the fight, then that really amplifies your training and your understanding of the fight. Um, and when I talked before about on a big mission how busy you are, and you're a weapon systems manager and a tactician, I can think of all those fights where you're just so busy you're not really concentrating on what you're doing. And I still have this vivid picture of being up at Red Flag, and we're going after an SA2, and myself and this B-52 are reacting to it, and I get a glimpse, and that B-52 crew was a hoot. I mean, they're flying this old bomber, and I mean their camaraderie on that airplane. You knew them from obviously mission planning and nights at the bar and stuff, but I still remember looking over my shoulder and this B-52 is standing on its wing and vaping like this huge, like imagine a huge airliner just like this and just pulling. And I remember looking at it going, oh my God. And it was a woo. And they were threat reacting to this SA2, and oh man, what a treat. I still have that as a vivid memory, and these little flashes of moments where you're like, oh my God, that's cool. Okay, now I got to carry on. It's those missions are something else.
Speaking of the B-52, it reminds me of a joke that I heard a long time ago. It still sticks with me. So four ship of Hornets are in the pattern, right? And the tower comes up on guard, and they're like, "Hey, whatever, Reaper." Example: Reaper 1-1 flight. Hold for a second. B-52 declaring an emergency, right?
Hmm.
And they wait, and the B-52 comes up on guard, and they're like, "Hey, yeah, we have an engine failure, right?" So lead on the interflight says calmly, deadpan, in typical fighter pilot fashion, "Well, boys, we're about to witness the dreaded seven-engine landing."
Yeah, 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 yeah. That's it.
uh,
Whenever you can get a dig in, I guess you do it, eh?
yeah.
So,
Dude, this is hilarious. This is great. So
yeah.
let's let's just pivot just for a second here. We're jumping all over the place. This is how beer calls roll, right? Um, let's talk a bit about let's see, what did I want to talk about? Yes, let's talk a bit about some of the highs and lows of command. I know Rose touched on it briefly, but considering you were a commanding officer of 425, let's talk a bit about the highs and lows of command and the work required to get a squadron, up and running and off to the races in terms of all the metrics that we have to worry about.
I'll I'm sure how Rose said it too is that I love that tour. I mean, it was a great tour. There's a bit of a luck of the draw element too to it. Is if things are going well for the unit and you got a team that really gels or not, and that can be a bit of a luck of the draw thing in some ways. But my command tour, I just there was just a group of people at 425 Squadron that were just excellent people. They were just all good people, no real tiffs, and the maintenance team in Baggaville brings a tear to my eye when you see them operate. It is something else to behold when they gel and really get the airplanes on the line. So in terms of that, the tour was just uh, it was just amazing to be a part of. I really enjoyed that, and there were troubles that happened, and I think that's the thing that you bear a little bit as the CO is, if somebody's having troubles at home or a family member dies or or one of the members of the unit, unfortunately, it that's the hard part, certainly, but it's because of the bonding of that unit that you're able to get through those things and those hard times. Um, I was just remarking to somebody the other day how we brought one of the guys over to Romania, and his wife was pregnancy was coming up, and I said to her myself, I said he's going to get home so fast, if the baby happens to come early, because we planned it that he would be back, in time for the birth.
Right.
And then sure enough, 4 in the morning, maybe, yeah, I think it was about 4 in the morning, he knocks on my door, and I'm like, what? And he goes, her water broke. I'm like, go. I just told him just start driving to the airport. It was about a 3 hour drive, I think, and I'm just like, just start driving. I will coordinate your flight, while you're on the move, and you're trying like crazy to get him there in time. And as it turned out, he just missed the birth. But we did his connection in Munich, and then he lands in Quebec City, or no, no, he landed in Montreal and then he got to Quebec City, and then one of the people from the squadron drove down to pick him up to drive him back because he couldn't make the Montreal connection, and just the whole team kind of comes together to make that happen. But he just missed the birth, but he saw his daughter within a couple hours after she's born. But those are the kind of triumphs you try to think about the triumphs more than the losses. That's for sure.
Yeah. Because a fighter squadron is a living, breathing organism. If you don't take care of your people, things are not going to go well.
Absolutely. Yep. It was a hard time for me. I was away from my family at the time. our girls stayed in Ottawa while I was there, so it was I'd only get back a couple of times a month. So that was a tough part for me, but the the squadron just really gelled in that window. I look back on it very fondly.
Yeah. Well, dude, we've been going at it for a little bit here. We've covered everything that I wanted to cover in, whatever my brain came up with, as it is, because it's a beer call type of format. So, my couple final questions are what are you doing right now? What's keeping you busy? And last but not least, call sign story. As is tradition on every fighter pilot or military aviation podcast known to man. So, what's keeping you busy?
Okay. Okay, what's keeping me busy? First of all, I'm down here on the Defense Strategic Studies course. It's like an executive level master's program that the military runs, and we have a similar course in Canada. So and we just have an exchange. So we send an Australian to the Canadian course to learn how to speak properly, and then I come down here. Then I come down here to do their course, and where I am right now is in the the capital in Australia, and if you read the name, you would say it Canberra, but the Australians pronounce it Canberra. It's not Sydney's not the capital, incidentally. It's here, and Canberra is where the college is.
Mm-hmm.
So it's a lot of classroom stuff. I'm writing essays again for the first time since I was at McMaster, so that's interesting. But I'm getting back on the step with the academic writing, and I'm really enjoying the people down here in the Aussies. Really do things well. They're a very good model for the Canadian Air Force right now because they're out ahead of us for sure on some of their generational shift that we're right on their heels though. And then call sign. Look, I'm just generous. What can I say? You need money. You need pick you up somewhere. Yeah, that's me. I'm just a generous guy, and yeah, that's all it is. Why would you assume anything different?
Because
Come
some
on,
of the
Mad Dog. Are
bros,
you a Mad Dog?
some of the bros told me otherwise today.
Oh yeah. Oh
I
okay.
won't
Yeah.
name
Well,
names, but some of the bros said there's more to it than just that.
does it rhyme with Kissman? Is that yeah?
No, some of the bros at the symposium. I won't name names.
Yeah, they
Uh,
said I was generous. I'm sure that's exactly what they said. Yeah, nice guy. That's
uh,
all.
anyways, Donor, this has been a hell of a lot of fun, dude. Um,
Yeah.
obviously, next time you're in Ottawa, let me know. Because Rose and I do semi-regular beer calls. If he's still talking to you, obviously, after the slander you put him through.
Hey,
Poor man.
you got a couple. You got like two zingers in there. He's still talking to you.
Hey, I'm allowed. I'm his best friend. This is how this works. Anyways, brother, this has been a lot of fun. Next time you're in Ottawa, let me know because we do the usual beer calls. Me, Rose, Go. Some of the Ottawa bros get together, right? So just let me know and we'll go from there.
Okay,
All
sounds
right,
good, Mad Dog, and thanks for your love of aviation. It's palpable.
all right. I'll see you, dude.
Okay.